Hey guys, I'm Tutorial Phil. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a two-part video. This is part one, and it's talking about shopping, in particular luxury shopping overseas. And I have most experience in Europe, in Paris, of course. If you've seen my Paris hauls, I think I have about 4 of them now. And I also did like a couple of Asia hauls when I did my vacation there last year. I'm not going to really be showing too much in this video, so this is almost like a podcast as well. You can honestly probably just listen to me, and I'll try to put some of the summary in this video as well. So if you are watching it, I'll try to put some information on the screen and then I'll add it to the description later. First thing is, of course, you need to figure out if that country offers tax-free. And basically all the countries in the Eurozone offer it. I know Japan does, Singapore does. Hong Kong is already sales tax free, so there's no such thing as getting your tax back. And for the most part, a lot of these countries use a third-party service like Global Blue or Premier Tax Free. They're probably the two biggest ones, and Global Blue is probably the bigger one. Although I just have more experience with it because Louis Vuitton uses Global Blue pretty much around the world, or wherever the countries that support Global Blue are. Hermes uses Premier Tax Free, and they're actually going through a rebranding right now because their kind of old brand and visual identity was getting kind of old, especially when you compare it to Global Blue. You want to make sure you bring your passport, so that's definitely the key when you go luxury shopping, and even when you're visiting a foreign country, your passport really is your form of identification. Most countries aren't going to know what your driver's license is, and it's just too unregulated, so it's hard for them to use that as an official identity. And you want to make sure you have a credit card that has no foreign transaction fee. Visa and Amex are definitely going to be your best bet. So the other thing you want to do research on is find out what the minimum spend is. It differs from country to country, even within the European zone. For Paris or for France, right now it's any spend over 175 and 1 cent euro. And it's a combined spend per store or per establishment. So let's say you were at a department store and you buy 3 things that combine to 180 euros, that would be eligible for tax-free. It's not just about a single item, but you have to make sure it's in the same receipt. So even if it's from the same store but you buy it in different receipts, those will not add up. So that's something you may want to keep in mind. But if you're shopping at Louis Vuitton, I don't think there's really much of anything that costs below that, so it's pretty much a safe bet when you're shopping at like Hermes, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, or Dior. The tax back you get is also different per country, although for Europe it's pretty standard around 12%. But when I visited Spain for the first time, I realized that they use a tiered system and you can get up to 15.7% via Global Blue. I don't know if there could be some other way to get higher, but if you use the refund calculator, which I'll link below, you select your country and you select your spend, it will give you the tax back. So for France, pretty much no matter what you spend, it's 12%. For Spain, I think you get 12% back around 1,000 euros, but then once you start going up, the max you can get, I believe, is 15.7%, but you have to spend, I think, over 5,000 euros. Something that I would also recommend is to get the contact information of a SA who works at the store. Because if you're planning a shopping trip, one of the worst things that happen is when you go there, they're out of stock. And it's not like you're going to go back to them in 2 weeks, because you may just be visiting them for a few days and then you're going to fly back to your home country. If it's your first time there, it's going to be harder to be able to source these, but Instagram, if you make the right connections, you can have people help you with connecting you with international sales associates. And there's no guarantee that they can reserve stock or anything like that for you, but at least you can get an idea of what might be available if you're eyeing something. And in some cases, they may be able to put it aside for you for a couple of days So right before you go, they might be able to put it aside and reserve it for you for a few days. And then also, I mentioned the shopping malls before. So the two big ones I would say is Printemps and Galeries Lafayette. There's also one across the river, Le Bon Marche. There's also a big department store. But I would say the first two I mentioned are bigger, and they're pretty much within the heart of Paris, within the shopping district. For those, when you purchase something, you have to go to another department to get your tax back or to get your tax forms. It's helpful in that you can go to different departments and purchase things for them to add up to 175. And then you go to a central location. I think for one of them, Printemps might have been in the basement, and then Galeries Lafayette might have been on the top floor. But I mean, they may have changed it, but it would be easy to find the information once you're there. You just have to make sure you allocate some time for that because the lines can be pretty long. I've never gone during the super busy season, but I heard sometimes the wait can be 30 minutes or even an hour to get your tax forms. Whereas if you go to Louis Vuitton, the tax forms are done right at the cash register. At least the one in Paris, at Champs-Élysées, they're just done for you right at the register, so you don't have to go to another desk to do your tax forms. You can get your tax back two ways, either cash or on a credit card. And I'm not exactly sure if you can get it back on your credit card if you paid cash, but I'm thinking that 99% of the time you're probably going to pay using your credit card, especially if it's going to be a high purchase. You're probably not going to roll into the store with a full stack of euros. You're going to use your credit card, or as they call it, a bank card. In the US, we call it a credit card. So I normally just get it back on my credit card, and for France, it's 12%. But I've been noticing that Global Blue and Premier Tax Free sometimes change their policies in terms of the transaction fees they take. The VAT, or the value added tax, is actually 20%, but you're only getting 12% back, which almost seems unfair, but they're taking I think what happens is the country still takes a cut of it by partnering with Global Blue or Premier Tax Free. And obviously Global Blue and Premier Tax Free, that's how they get their money, is they also get a cut, which is like a service fee for being the middle person between the government and yourself in order to get your tax back. One year though, what I noticed happened was that Global Blue will only refund you back in your main currency, or the currency that your credit card is from the country it was issued from. And in doing so, they themselves decided to add their own 3% transaction fee for foreign transactions. Plus, for the conversion rate, they would give you their own bank conversion rate, which is less than what the going rate is in the market. So at one point, even though it was 12%, I think I only got back like 8% or less, which that I think was stealing. Then my most recent trip, I found out that they may have reversed it, or I just don't know what happened, but this time they only took an extra 1%. I'm not sure why either, because I thought in my first time that I went there, I did get the full 12% back. But for this trip that I took in October of 2018, on my credit card, I got back 11% when I calculated it out. For cash, you only get, when I calculate it, you only get 10.8% as opposed to 12%. And that's because there's an extra service fee for doing so. There are two ways to get your cash back though. One is just like with a credit card, you process it at the airport. But another way is you can get your cash back immediately right after you purchase it. So while you're basically still there. I think Global Blue maybe is the only one that does this. I'm not 100% sure. But I did do that this past time because the advantage of getting your cash back right away is that you can spend it for smaller things that you would normally have to go to a bank to get money out, and then they're going to at least charge you a 3% fee, as well as if you use like an ATM machine, you get an additional charge for using that ATM machine. It's kind of a good trick if you don't have any euros with you. You can start off with one of your luxury purchases and then get just cash back right then and there, and then be able to use that cash without having to withdraw it from a bank. And I mean, if you can avoid it, you definitely don't want to go to one of those currency converters, because they definitely take a big chunk. It's definitely more than 3%. It's probably closer to 6% that they take. After you've purchased everything, you do want to make sure you take a photo of your receipts and the tax-free form, because if there's anything that goes wrong, you're required to send them a copy of that form so that they can validate the details. Plus, that form has a barcode on the top right with the number that you can use online to track your refund, and it'll tell you where it is in the process. There's only one time that I didn't get my tax back, and this was the first time I did this tax-free, and it was because I was leaving with a different country, and they said supposedly they didn't get the form, and it could have just been mishandled by the clerk who was there, who may have just thrown it away. So that's something you never know. I don't think that really happens commonly, but in Paris, it's a lot easier to get your forms validated because you just scan it in what they call the Pablo kiosks, and then you're done. And then you put your tax forms in the envelope that Global Blue or Premier Tax Free provides, and you just drop it off in the provided slots for them to send it to their offices. But when I went to France and Italy in my first European trip, I left via Italy back home, and they didn't have the Pablo kiosk. So you had to go to a service desk and have them manually scan and check your forms, stamp it, and then submit it to the like Global Blue or Premier Tax Free. And that's definitely more chances that something could happen to the paperwork. So that's why you want to make sure you get the tax forms. You want to make sure you take a picture of them after it's stamped if you're in that situation. But if you're using the Pablo kiosk in Paris, they don't stamp it. You just scan it, and it's automatically registered in the system. I believe if you are not doing the Pablo kiosk, you may need to have your plane ticket in hand in order to get them stamped by the customs officer. What they tell you is that you want to make sure you didn't check in your luggage yet, because there are sometimes they do need to check the item, and if you don't have it with you, they're not going to be able to stamp it. And if it's not stamped, Global Blue or Premier Tax Free, they're definitely not going to refund you. Back to the airport, the easiest is Charles de Gaulle, because there's always staff there, and there's, I think, probably over 6 machines at the main terminal that you can use, and I've never really had to wait more than 10 minutes, if any. And I mean, that's probably going to depend on what time of the day you get on your flight, but for me, I've never really had to wait more than that. So like I was saying, for the Pablo kiosk, you don't need your plane ticket, so you can just go right ahead before you even check in, just right at the airport. Just once you arrive there, just go directly to where they have the refund office. And I believe it's for Charles de Gaulle, I think it was in the first floor. You may have to actually go downstairs when you arrive. If you take a taxi, you have to go, after you get into the airport, I believe it's downstairs. You should have your items with you, and then your forms, and then you scan it, and you'll either get a green status or a red status. And a green status means it's fine, and then you just scan the next one until you're complete. And once you're complete, there's like a finish button, and it'll tell you that, okay, we've processed 3 forms. And then once you're done, you put the tax forms in those envelopes that Global Blue or Premier Tax Free would have provided you, and then you just put them in the slot. I think there's just one slot for both companies, but you do want to make sure you're putting the tax forms in the right envelope. You can put more than one form in an envelope though. So if you have 3 Global Blue tax-free forms, you can just put it all in one envelope, and because it's just going to be more work to put one form in each envelope, it's going to save you time, and they prefer it that way, so they don't have to open more envelopes than they have to. I know when you're a first timer, you may feel like you want to put it in each. There are times when you get a red status, and that happened when I was getting my tax refund for the Cartier Panthère ring. And this usually happens for items that are above 10,000 or 15,000 euro. And what happens is you get the red status and you have to bring your receipt, and at that point you may need your boarding pass as well as the item to the customs office for the officer to examine it. And what I've heard from the essays, the advice that they give, like when I purchased the Cartier, is that you want to make sure it's in the original packaging with any tags, everything as intact as possible, because they will examine it. And let's say with the ring, even if the ring looks completely new and you say you didn't have the box, they probably might not stamp it because they need to see the entire packaging. There may be some things you can get away with, like if it's Louis Vuitton, I guess let's say you bought an alligator item and it was over 10,000, you may be able to get away with saying that the box was too big for me to put in my luggage. But honestly, since it's before check-in, you really should just bring the box, even if it's large, and then you can just throw it away at the airport if you don't intend on bringing it back with you. Because if it's a $10,000 item, you're risking over 1,000 euro or like 1,000 euro tax back that you may not get back if the customs officer decides that you don't have everything, so they're not going to stamp it, and therefore there's no way you can get your tax back after that. For multi-year or multi-destination trips, like when I went to Paris and then I went to Milan, you get your tax forms stamped and validated at the last country before leaving the Eurozone. So for me, it was Italy, and that's where I had to do it manually because they didn't have the Pablo kiosk there. So that's something to keep in mind if you're planning your trip and if you know you're going to do shopping. You may want to end up in Paris before you go back because it's just going to be a lot easier to validate your forms there. So that's pretty much it. When you're back home, you can track your refund on the websites, and then you can also check your credit card statements or your app to see when they deposited the money. It can take as quick as I've had some that was as quick as 1 or 2 business days. And I've had some that were, I think, two months or 2 to 3 months. You never really know, and it's hard to estimate, but that's usually the time frame. I think the majority of my tax back gets back to me within a week or 2. But usually I think the higher value ones, they scrutinize it a little bit more, so those may take longer. A quick summary of this is, when you're out shopping, make sure you have your passport. Make sure you've signed up for a no foreign transaction free credit card ahead of time so you can use that. Decide if you want to get your tax back via your credit card or through cash. And make sure when you go to the airport, for Paris it's the easiest because they have the Pablo kiosk. Just make sure you scan all of the forms and keep the items with you in case anything goes wrong and you have to go to the customs office. For example, if you have any single items that are valued 10,000 euros or more, you definitely want to make sure you keep your items intact, unused in the original packaging, because those definitely have more chances of raising a red flag, and then you have to get it manually checked at the customs office. Also, make sure to take pictures of your tax-free forms, and if you're in a country that doesn't have the Pablo kiosk, make sure you take a picture of it with the stamp that you get from the customs office, because if anything goes wrong, you can at least send that form back to Global Blue or Premier Tax Free, and they may be able to issue you the tax free if in case your form got lost in the mail. But they do need to see that stamp, otherwise they're going to say that they don't know if you actually left the country. If you intend to get cash back immediately, you still have to go through the same process. You still have to scan your form or get the form validated and send it into Global Blue or Premier Tax Free. Don't make the mistake of thinking once you get your tax-free in cash immediately that you can just throw away the forms, because they still need to know if you actually left the country. So it's kind of a trust thing. But what happens if, let's say, you forgot to scan it, they're gonna charge your card that you have to provide when you get the cash back immediately. They're gonna do a chargeback for the amount that they refunded you, and therefore you have just lost your tax-free. So make sure, even if you get your cash back immediately, you still have to scan it and you still have to send the form in. So that's my video. Thank you for watching. Part 2 will be about how I get my boxes back to the States, or any packaging that may not fit in your luggage or you may not want to bring in your luggage. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe for more videos and check out my Instagram for the latest updates and exclusive content. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.